Welcome back, listeners. This is Tales of Abundance. I'm Dr. John Oberg, and with me, as always, my co-host, Randy Lorensen. Randy, here we are.
Good afternoon, John.
How have you been?
I've been good. You?
Yeah, long time no talk.
Yeah.
Inside joke. So today, on the show, we're going to go into a little bit different location, which is one of just my personal curiosities, and that is around the world of professional poker. And, you know, this is a world that I know very, very little about. And what I do know about professional poker is because you've shared with me. And I think it's something that, you know, you don't wear professional poker on your sleeve. It's not a part of what you do day to day anymore. But you did live in that world for
8 years, I think.
Yeah, 8 years. And successfully in terms of being able to make money doing it. And you're not one of the names that people talk about, Annie Duke and, you know, Phil Hellmuth, and I don't know any more of them, but there's a lot of names that
Phil Ivey, Doyle Brunson. There's a lot.
Phil Ivey. Yeah. Who's Hellmuth?
He's a very good big tournament player.
Got it. Phil Ivey, I know. I've seen him on TV once. I've watched a couple of TV shows getting ready here, but I don't remember all the names. And professional poker is a hard way to make a living.
Can be.
Yeah.
Most people can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so when we were getting ready for the show, I shared with you a personal story about this. I think I surprised you a little bit with it, didn't I?
Yeah, I had never heard that before.
Yeah. So when so growing up, my mom and biological father are divorced, and so when I talk about my dad, I'm talking about my stepdad, who was one of the most loving people I've ever met. Passed away when I was a young kid, and that's my dad. But my biological father divorced my mom because he was addicted to cocaine and gambling, and he was a poker shill for a casino, and all kinds of bad things happened that was communicated to me through his mom, my grandmother, who I did stay close with over the years. And that's not a part of my story that I tell publicly very often. Dad passed away when I was a young kid. Biological father passed away a few years ago. Reconnected with him when I was 27, 28 years old, and didn't have a strong relationship, but did reconcile enough to have conversations. And so I thought that was important to share early in the show today, because there might be some bias that sneaks up that I'm unaware of, that for years I had a real negative judgment towards gambling. And I think that went away for the most part in my early 20s. But anyway,
But you've always had a curiosity about it. As much as anybody I know, you've always asked questions. I think that explains where some of that comes from, like where that curiosity. I mean, you're naturally curious anyway.
Yeah.
But I've always noticed you've had more interest in that than a lot of people.
And I think, you know, pulling the thread on that one just a minute or two, I'd say that, you know, for me, I think I was interested in understanding why someone would go do that at the cost of a family, and particularly when I was the family. Like that's a real, like, deep-seated, like, we're gonna get therapists calling in, offering their services to me after this one, I'm sure. But I think there's you know, I had not put two and two together until you just said that this very moment, so I'm processing in real time here. But I think my curiosity is around what is the motivation, and I think that there's a part of the story that I know also. Okay, here we go. So I talked to one of my biological father's shipmates when he was in Vietnam about how Vietnam impacted. His name's Neil. How it impacted Neil, and it was not a positive impact on him. And he came back from Vietnam in a really different way than he went over there. And so I think that what I've come to the conclusion, at least enough for my lifetime, is that it was a coping tool and it was a mechanism. And, you know, drugs and gambling were a way of him dealing with a really, you know, crappy situation for him. Not making excuses, just acknowledging what happened as best as I can put it together, kind of retrospectively, with him not in the picture. And so, so no negative judgment from me, but a lot of curiosity about what that world is like, and for reasons I may not even fully understand.
Yeah, there's definitely a dark side, right? Like, people that play poker for a living would tell you it's not gambling. I would tell you it's not gambling. There's some gambling in there, right? You're sort of putting yourself in the place of the casino, where you put the odds on your side.
Yeah.
Okay. But I have also, and this is part of the reason I got out of poker when I got out, is, yeah, I've said before, I wanted to be a contributing member of society, but I also watched people ruin their lives, and watched people that had families, and they were addicted. I don't think gambling is nearly as addictive as, say, cocaine or nicotine or any number of other things.
Sure.
But certainly there are people that are addicted to it.
Sure.
100%, right?
Yeah.
And I've watched many people ruin their lives, and frankly, probably made a decent amount of money off some of these people, right?
Yeah.
Like as part of the process. So that's a real thing.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you played poker before you got into professional poker.
Not much. I mean, I remember playing a little bit as a kid. The first time I remember playing poker was a game called Guts. The rules aren't important, but I remember when I was a kid, I would go with my dad to the local store out in the middle of the country. This store was a mile and a half away, and the guys would get in this back room, and they would sit around and drink beer and play poker. And when I was there, my dad would take me with, and I was just sitting there. But I remember my dad went to the bathroom, and he let me play his hand. And I won, and I was pretty good. And pretty soon, my dad put me in the game, and I won.
How old?
I was young. I mean, I'm sure this is bad parenting. 7 years old, 8. I mean, I was young.
Okay.
And 6, 7, I don't know. But math was pretty easy for me, and came and numbers, and I figured it out and I'd watched enough. I figured it out pretty fast. And so I would go play, and I was a winning player even at that age.
Yeah.
Right. So,
okay.
And then a little bit older in school.
Did you get to keep the money?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd play for quarters, and it's probably big money for me back then.
Yeah.
Quarters were actually worth something back then,
right,
believe it or not. And then I didn't.
Somebody asked me if I had a quarter the other day. I laughed. I was like, "Are you serious? Did you just really ask that question?"
And I think I played a couple times. I think one time I went to a casino when I lived in Iowa, and I played 7-card stud for a night, blah, blah, blah. But
that wasn't a thing you and your friends did for fun on Friday nights or whatever.
There was nothing close, and I was too busy working. I was grinding, right? There was no time. I didn't have time for any of that.
So then what was your first exposure then?
So a guy I played football with asked me if I played craps. I said no. But I've been in casinos, and those guys seem to have the most fun. I would love to learn how to play craps.
Yeah.
So he took me to my...
I think it is the most fun.
Yeah. You go around. That's where everybody, they laugh. It is. It's the funnest place in the casino. So, in my opinion. So we went to who has become one of my good friends, my friend Lance's house, and he'd have these $20 craps tournaments. And we went, and they explained the rules to me. And again, I'm good at math, and I figured out right away this is a mathematical problem. And there's, 15 people around the table. We play. The winner takes all the money, except for, I think second place gets their money back. The winner takes it all. And the first time I play, I think I get second. The second time I play, I win. And all of a sudden, they keep doing this frequently. And honestly, I win so much that I pretty much kill the game. People, instead of having 15 people, pretty soon there's 10 people, and there's 8 people, and there's 6 people. We're playing all the time, and somebody goes, well, we should play poker. And I remember thinking, well, I'm making good money playing this craps, because we're having multiple tournaments
So your craps
a night.
experience is primarily just a fun home game.
Yeah, it was just, $20, but
I've never played a huge craps game in my life. I've played in Vegas. I ended up playing with Senator John McCain once. Came in and played at a table with us, and he's just the nicest guy in the world. I don't know what his politics were, and I wasn't into Arizona national politics. But it's fun to have a celebrity come and play.
So that was it, and
you realized you were the celebrity in that game, that home game. You were the guy coming back, you were the all-time winner.
I guess I don't know.
The Randy Lorensen Hall of Fame.
But we started out. We would then go play maybe one craps tournament instead of.
Okay, what's the key to craps, by the way?
In a casino or a tournament?
In a house tournament.
At the end, it's just winner take all. So you have to be able to, everybody at the table know exactly how many chips they have and what they're betting and how much they'll have if they hit and how to counter that. It's if this person hits, I have to bet this so that I have more than them. And when we would count up,
so you weren't trying to get everyone's chips. It's whoever had the biggest stack.
Whoever has the biggest. At the end at a certain set time of finishing.
Not everyone was bankroll. I would
frequently win by $1.
Got it.
Everybody would start with $200 in chips or whatever we started with. And at the end, somebody would go, oh, I think I got Randy this time. And I'd go, no, you have 3,214 and I have 3,215. And I would be betting just enough. I could do the math in my head that they couldn't do, and that I would be doing things that counter.
Definitely would not have won that game.
And I understood the odds. I'd look where their bet is, and I'm like, oh, that's probably going to go to 0. So sometimes it was just
so you were
betting.
you were actually literally playing craps against the person. So that doesn't
Yeah.
work in Vegas.
Right. You can't. That's not the way it works in a casino.
Yeah. Okay.
Like there is no way to edge a casino.
Got it. Well, it'd be build the casino. That's how
Right.
you win it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So there we are.
Yeah. They don't build those casinos from all the winners.
Yeah.
Everybody goes to Vegas and comes back, tells you how much they won, but
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. But this was right around, or maybe even a little before, the Chris Moneymaker phenomena and the World Series of Poker. But poker was becoming a big thing, and so we started going to his table and having $20 poker tournaments. And the first night we played, I won, right? And I actually just wanted to play craps because I thought it was more fun. I wanted to go back to it. But they kept wanting to play poker. Well, after we played a few nights, I thought, well, if we're really going to do this, because I'm winning at this too, and I just could do the math and the stats and the odds.
Yeah.
Like most people that play poker very much. So
Math and stats.
Yeah,
Sorry, we had a
most
little technical hiccup there if we don't cut it out.
most people that play now have read enough books, they just memorize
Yeah.
that if the flop comes out in Texas Hold'em, which means there's 2 cards to come, and they have a flush draw, there's a 38% chance they're going to hit it, right? Somebody has told them that. Whether
Yep.
they really understand it or not is another story. The first time I played, I just went through it. I'm like, okay, there's 52 cards in the deck. I got 2 in my hand, that leaves 50. I see 3 on the board, that's 47. There's 2 diamonds out there. I have 2 in my hand. I need 1 more. There's 13 in the deck. There's 9. Anyway, I was able to do that math and figure out what the percentages were, which gave me a huge edge
Yeah.
on other people. But then when we kept playing, I went and I bought actually Phil Helmy's book, Doyle Brunson's book, which was called Super System, which was then kind of considered the Bible of poker. And I read those things. And now I really had an advantage over everybody, right? And you know, I learned some things about aggression and betting, to using bets as a weapon and as a tool, right? And I just won, and I was making money. And at the time, me and my partner had an energy efficiency
did
business.
that work in a $20 game where $20 is $20 the same way?
I mean, it did. I mean, but you're right, you have to adapt to your opponent. It
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
work against everybody.
Sure.
Some people you only bet when you've got it because they're going to call.
Right.
Right? But
Right.
other people play tight. And so a big part of being a poker is you don't play every player the same,
Yeah.
right? If somebody's real conservative, being aggressive works really well. If they're really loose and being aggressive isn't going to work,
Right.
right? Because it's just bluffing you don't bluff somebody that's unbluffable,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, I mean, you have a martial arts background. It's probably a little bit like using,
Yeah, sure.
I've never thought about this till right now, but probably a lot of using whatever they do against them. That was one of my strengths, is I was very adaptable and able to play differently against different people
Yeah.
and different games and different styles. And I was able to even just very adaptable and able to change on the fly.
Yeah.
From one game to a next and one person to a next.
And that sounds like that probably played it all the way through like professional tables.
Yeah.
When people think about professional poker, I think a lot of people, at least, well, I'll just say for me, I thought like World Series of Poker, like that was like, and that's, I guess you'd call that tournament poker. I don't even know if that's the right language.
So tournament poker is where you go and you pay an entry fee. On my friend's kitchen table, it was $20, and we got whatever, $100 or $200 of chips. And you go till somebody has all the chips, right?
And as long as you don't rake the pot, meaning as long as someone doesn't take money from that pot, legal in most places.
Yeah, in Texas, completely legal.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the World Series of Poker, you get, when I first started, the first year I played the World Series of Poker, when you bought in for $10,000, they gave you $10,000 in chips. And then if I remember right, at some point they wanted more play, so they raised it to $20,000 in chips, and then they raised it to $30,000 in chips, and you get that and you play. Now, on my friend's kitchen table, the game was set up where the blinds escalate at a rate that a tournament would take an hour or two. They'd be very quick. We'd play several a night.
Yeah.
The World Series of Poker takes 3 or 4. I can't remember. I haven't played it in almost 10 years now. But no, 3 or 4 days just hit the money.
Yeah.
Like to get rid of 90% of the field so you hit the money. To win takes weeks.
Like more than 1 week?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's multiple day ones, and then there's a couple of day twos, and then there's, again, I haven't played in 10 years, but then I've played poker, but I haven't played the World Series because I just haven't I don't have 2 weeks. I just haven't
Yeah.
had 2 weeks to go. I've kind of been thinking, maybe
Yeah.
I should go play one of these years, but it's hard to go out there and spend 2 weeks in Vegas. Just,
Yeah.
because you have to plan on, if you're going to go, you might as well plan on winning,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, no, if you have to go, you
yeah.
might as well plan on winning. If I had to go, I'd plan on
Right.
being there for a day.
Right. Like the last time I played, I think I played the first day one. So I had to wait 3 days to come back for day two. Then I had to wait a couple days to come back for day three. And I busted out, day 7 or 8 it was fairly deep, which was, I don't know, more than a week into the tournament.
Sure.
Right.
And so there are people that pay $10,000 or whatever the entry fee is to get in. And there's some people that earn their way in too.
Yeah. It's called a satellite tournament. So you might play, a common satellite might be, you have 10 people, they play one table, and the winner gets instead of getting $10,000 in cash, the winner gets a $10,000 seat, right? So a $1,000 entry. Or it's a $2,000 entry and the top two get. Maybe more common is you have 100 people play a tournament and the top 10 get a seat, right? For a $1,000 entry.
God,
But
how many
there could be
people
for
are playing?
$200 entries. There could be all different. It could be any.
How many
structure.
people play in the World Series in Vegas? Is it a big
I
tournament?
think the biggest one was 10 or 12,000.
Okay.
I think I heard this year it was 8,000 something, but I really need to be fact checked on that because I have not.
Thousands of people.
I have not paid nearly as much
Yeah.
attention for the last, several years.
But thousands of people.
Yes, many. I
Okay.
think it was 8,000 something this year
Okay.
in
All
that
right.
ballpark.
But that's not, when you talk about professional poker, I mean, the World Series of Poker is a tournament. There are lots of tournaments all the time.
Most of those people are probably not pros.
Got it.
A lot of people are going to take a shot.
Yeah. But professional poker is played where?
Could be tournaments. There's professional tournament players. There's
And do you
professional
play-
cash game players.
And those games, I mean, those games, they might be the same rules. You might be playing, what do you guys play? Hold'em?
Yeah, but there's Hold'em, there's Omaha. So,
But whatever you're playing, you could play Hold'em in a tournament, Hold'em in what you're calling a cash game, Hold'em somewhere else. And those are three different.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Think of it like track and field.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'm making this analogy up on the fly, so it may not be perfect. But track and field, you've got people that run, you've got people that throw things, you've got people that jump. Let's just put it in
Sure.
roughly 3 categories, right? They're all track and field events. Well, Texas Hold'em might be one form. Omaha, there's stud games, and there's a whole bunch of different games, just like there's different events in track and
Yeah,
field.
sure.
But even within running, you've got the 100 meters, the 200 meter,
Yeah.
up through long distance,
Indoor,
and they
outdoor.
all have different skills and different things, right?
So a cash game is a different set of skills than a tournament game.
Yeah, cash game is everybody takes cash, you change it into chips dollar for dollar, and you play and try to take everybody's money.
Yeah.
In a tournament, when you go broke, generally, there are rebuys, but when you go broke, you're out of the tournament. Okay?
Yeah.
When in a cash game, if you go broke, as long as you have money in your pocket, you're still and want to put it in play, you're still in the game. And you can add money you can't take money off the table till you're done, but you can add money anytime you want. Okay.
Even in the middle of a hand?
No, not in the middle of a hand.
Okay.
But before a hand starts
Got
at
it.
any time, you can add money to the table, yes.
Got it.
And then what you win, you cash out, or you lose, you cash out. Now,
And so if you go to a poker room in Vegas, that's a cash game.
well, both could be happening.
Yeah, you give a
And there's
tournament
different
game.
games,
Yeah,
right?
but if you go to like the poker room at a casino and there's not a tournament happening,
Right.
that would be a version of a
Right.
cash game.
Right.
And then there's cash games that are not in casinos as well, that are like the home games you were talking
I
about.
played a lot of home games.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
And so who, you don't have to name names, but like, are there professional players that you were like, I don't want to be at that guy's table?
Yeah, not a lot. I thought very highly of my skills. Maybe it was arrogant. I played with very few people that I didn't think I was better than. And, where I really kind of settled in was the 10-20 game at the Bellagio. I think back, that was stupid. That was a hard game. That game was so full of pros.
What's 10-20 mean?
The small blind is $10, the big blind's $20. I mean, you could buy into the game for $600, but you had like the average stack. I mean, I remember sitting at that table where the average stack was 50 or 100,000. I've been in that game where people have sat down with $1 million in front of them, right? Which is a little irrelevant. If the next biggest stack is $250,000, you can only lose the amount of the next biggest stack. But that was a tough game. But I do remember. So
Is that because the blinds were too big or too small?
what do you mean?
Like you said, 10-20 was too, like that was a competitive game because lots of people were there.
Yeah,
Where would a less competitive
so
game?
the less game was like 5-10. It was a much easier game to beat. And I remember seeing a lot of times kids, they'd build their bankroll at 5-10, and they'd come take a shot at 10-20, and they would just every one of them would get killed. And then you'd see them, they'd go back to that 5-10 game. They'd spend 3 months beating up on the 5-10 game. They'd build their bankroll. They'd come take another shot. They'd go broken one night, inevitably, and they'd go back. It was a really tough game.
If you went back, you'd go play the 5-10 game?
If I went back, I would go and play in L.A. When I went to L.A., I made so much money. Like I just destroy the L.A. games at the Commerce were so much easier. So much easier. And some of it was that, but a lot of it was my style. Like the size of the bets, and the Bellagio was, people might sit down with 10 or 20 or 50 or 100,000 in front of them, where in LA, the game, people would buy in for 1,000 or 2,000, and people gambled a lot. It was just had a different feel to the game. And instead of 2 people seeing a flop, all of a sudden in LA, 6 people saw the flop. And a lot of my strengths, I was good at the math, but I probably benefited more from my ability to play post-flop. And a lot of professional poker players, their whole strategy is just to keep themselves out of tough decisions and not put that pressure on themselves and not have to make tough reads or questionable decisions. I thrived on being put into that situation, and I was very, very good at coming out of it unscathed and being able to make tough decisions. And the more hands I could play a lot of times without getting crazy, but I wanted to be in hands, be able to find creative ways to win pots. And a lot of times I made good money playing against other pros because they were so predictable, and I could zig when they zagged and vice versa. And so that game just played a different style that probably in Austin at the home games and the underground games that I cut my teeth in was it's called loose, which means people just gamble more. And that was the way things just went in Austin poker. A lot of people seeing a flop and a lot more gambling. And the Bellagio wasn't that way. There was too much money on the table that people weren't willing to take those risks.
They knew enough about they knew enough about the game to play a more standard game, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, nobody's going into that game. Nobody's going to go. You have to have a lot of money to start losing tens of thousands of dollars, or even, to put that money at risk and just totally gamble is a different level of wealth that most people aren't willing to do. Some people are.
Any celebrities along the way you played with?
Oh God, a lot. I mean, a lot of ex-athletes. The most famous of which probably Charles Barkley I played with a few times. Leonardo DiCaprio, different celebrities. James Woods several times.
Any of them really good?
Of the celebrities? No, James Woods I think was pretty good the little bit I played against him. Shannon Elizabeth, from the American Pie movies, was actually not bad. Like, she was playing professionally for a while. Jennifer Tilly was playing professionally for a while. I don't know if they were winning, but they were not bad. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. Oral Hershiser played pretty well.
Wouldn't have guessed that one.
He played pretty well. I think he moved to Vegas. In fact, I think at one point when he was doing commentary for the Dodgers, he was living in Vegas and he would fly to L.A. to do Dodger games and then fly back.
Not the brand he had for himself.
No. So, and a few other, there were NBA guys. I remember there'd be times where NBA guys would just, all of a sudden, like a whole team would come to the Bellagio, where quite a few NBA guys came through. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know. I'm sure I'm forgetting other people. Tobey Maguire was, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were playing certainly at some point. During the World Series, you'd see people. George Costanza, what's his real name? Jason Alexander.
Yeah.
Actually played a hilarious... didn't watch the show much. I did a little after. The tall guy in Everybody Loves Raymond. I think he was the brother, maybe.
Yeah.
Brad Garrett.
That sounds
I
right.
think he sat at my table for hours one day during the World Series of Poker, and I loved it because he just told jokes and he was funny and he was just he was great entertainment to have at the table.
Yeah.
Right. Probably one of my favorite people I've ever played with. That just because he made it, and other people bitched, like he got into the bathroom and they bitched because he talked to them, and I'm like, he's funny, he's entertaining us. It's hours a lot of boredom. Like you sit there, especially a tournament like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember times where I wouldn't play a hand for 3 or 4 hours. Like I played, and I generally played a lot of hand, but sometimes in a tournament, it just the situation didn't arise, and you just fold and fold. I mean, sometimes it's hours of boredom. Yeah. And having somebody there that entertained me, and I was very social. I know that'll come shocking to you, but I like to talk and do that. So,
those tickets to see that guy are expensive. I mean, it's free show.
Yeah, it was great.
Might even get paid to play with him.
Oh, I think I'm forgetting some people. It's been a while.
Yeah, and then of the pros you played with, I mean, it sounds like you played with all the big names.
Oh, back to your question. I went on a tangent. I did. Okay, so when I played the 10-20 table, I remember my friend Lane. He was playing. I believe the game was 25-50 or 20-40. It was a bigger game, but it played even bigger than that. And I looked at that table, and I was like, oh, hell no. Like, that table was full of killers. And Lane was really good. Lane was a better cash game player than I was. But Brian Rast was in that game who, I think is, maybe to this day, top 5 players in the world. Kenny Tran was a killer. Gabriel Thaler, Viffer. I mean, that game had some heavy like people that are well-known people that were on TV that had a much bigger name than me, that everybody would know, would not go near that game, right? I don't know if Phil Ivey would play in that game, right? Like those guys were Hold'em. Those are some of the best Hold'em players in the world, but there would be enough tourists that would come want to take a shot at that game that they could, if somebody comes to that game and drops 50,000, 6-7 people can split that up, and the next guy comes and drops 30, and the next guy, those guys were making a lot of money.
So they weren't playing against each. I mean, they weren't like colluding, but they weren't playing against each other.
No, there's a lot of that, right? Like even in the game I played 9-handed, there's a lot of times there were 7 or 8 pros at the table, and you're just all kind of not playing together. You're trying to take each other's money, but
you know where it's easy and where it's hard.
Yeah, I remember at the World Series.
Is that the whole thing? Like, if you don't know who the sucker at the table is?
Yeah, it's you.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it doesn't matter if you're the 9th best player in the world. If you sit at a table with the 8 people better than you,
right,
you're going to lose, right? But I remember World Series of Poker, main event. I'm on a TV table day 1. Somebody that anybody that watches, I don't want to use this person's name because I don't want to throw them under the bus, but somebody that everybody would know, right? Well-known, written books, etc. Had one of the highest Q ratings, period. That's why there was a TV table.
What's a Q rating?
It's a TV, how popular you are.
Okay.
Right?
I don't have a Q rating.
At the first break, comes to me and goes, hey, it's pretty clear you and I are the 2 best players at this table. I won't mess with you if you don't mess with me. We can pick off these other 7 idiots, right? And I was like, I was very uncomfortable with stuff like that. It's not uncommon in poker, right? In different things. And I was like, okay, right? And so now later, by the way, they kind of attacked me, right? And they didn't necessarily play by that. But there was but without having that conversation, you know who you don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as tournament play, I played with almost everybody. Never played with Ivy. The only person, and this might surprise people that know, and this is, a few years ago, but the only person that scared me was the Dragon, David Pham. I could never get a read on him. I could never figure out where I was in the hand. He was the only guy, and he won Player of the Year one year. Was runner-up, I think, a couple other times. In my opinion, the best tournament player I've ever played with, and it's not a close second. There's really played with tons of people. but he, and by the way, I played cash games with him, and I would destroy him. I would gut him. He was not good, but as a tournament player, best I've ever seen. He, at least,
how can
maybe
be
it was
that
my style.
different though? Like, is the style that different in a cash game versus tournament games?
I don't know why. Maybe it was mindset with him. It is. There aren't that many people. Like you asked about Phil Hellmuth earlier. And again, I haven't seen him play for several years, but when I was playing, okay, if you needed to bet your money on somebody in the main event of the World Series of Poker, he might be my first pick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's generally a weak field, lots of amateurs. He could sit around, wait. He was disciplined. He could wait for people to make mistakes, right, and take advantage of it. Some people that I think are much better poker players that I had way more respect for and can win other things weren't nearly as good. They weren't patient enough at the World Series. Like a guy like Phil Ivey is playing a game that even back then, I think it was $1 million minimum buy-in. In a tournament, it's like, I got to get all the chips. I can't spend, if I'm not going to go deep in this thing, I need to go broke so I can go get back to this game, right? That's a real, cost analysis of the time being spent.
So I got to leave this tournament so I can go back to the cash game.
Yeah, like I either have to, like some people that played really high stakes in cash didn't have the discipline, or maybe it's not the discipline, maybe it's that they did have the discipline to be really aggressive early and try and get a lot of chips or go broke so they could go back there, right?
That way they're making, it's dollars per hour of earning.
But Hellmuth sitting down at a cash game with me would not scare. By the way, he wouldn't scare me in a big tournament either because he's pretty predictable. He's not dangerous to me, right? I mean, in a cash game, I don't think there's any way he's a winning player, right? I mean, I've played with him briefly one time. I mean, I don't think he's a winning player, right? So it's just different. And some people only play Hold'em. Some people only play Omaha. Some people only play. So the Bellagio used to have this daily $1,000 tournament, okay? And they would start at 6, 7 in the morning having satellites into it. There were people that made a living. They would go and play satellite after satellite after satellite. The first one you had to play the tournament, and then the next one you could sell it and get the $1,000 for the entry fee. There were multiple people that went in there, and they were satellite, which was a 10-person single table tournament, and they would every day, 7 days a week. They were there playing from the time it opened to the time. And by the way, they weren't good then at the $1,000 tournament. They'd very seldom cash, but they made enough money to be able to sell that, and that was their little niche.
You make $200,000 a year doing that.
There's riches and niches, right?
Yeah.
And I remember this guy that played in the 10-20 game. He was an older guy. He dressed like a Jewish gangster in the sweats, the matching sweatsuit and everything. And I remember other pros would look at this guy and go, he's no good at poker, right? Because he was the math, and he was conservative, and he took zero risks. I mean, if his money went in, you were screwed. Like, he was the easiest guy in the world to play against, right? He was almost incapable of bluffing. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, you guys don't respect him because he's not creative. Like, these are really high-level people I'm talking about now. Like, these are some of the best players in the world. Like, you guys don't respect him, but that guy makes $200K a year.
Only plays winning hands.
And takes very little risk. He sits here. He plays poker for a living. He hasn't had a job in 30 years. He drives a really nice Mercedes. He trades it in every couple of years for a new one. I mean, we don't respect it because it wasn't high level, but he had mastered that game.
Well, if you're not playing to win, you're playing to make money. That's a different outcome.
But and that guy,
I never really thought about that before, right?
That guy would never make it in a tournament. That guy would never. He has almost no chance to win a tournament because he wouldn't take enough risks. Like there's times in tournaments where you got to YOLO, right? Like sometimes you just have to go for it, like the odds and.
What are some of the biggest hands you've been in? Like you talk about, you only live once, YOLO. What are some of the biggest hands you've been in?
The biggest hand I think I ever played. I mean, it's all perspective a little bit, but I'm in Atlantic City. I'm playing. I think it was a $3,000 tournament, and it was a really unique situation. There's 19 people left. 18 make the money. First prize was $365,000. And there was me and a guy at my table who everybody just kept coming looking at us. I've literally never been in another tournament where I've seen this. If you took my chip stack and compared it to everybody in the tournament except his, there was no doubt I had more chips than everybody else, the other 17 people combined. And same thing with this guy. And neither one of us quite knew for exactly who had more chips. We have huge stacks in front of us. Like we've got, I don't remember the numbers, but let's just say we each have $500,000 in front of us, and everybody else is sitting on like 20,000, right? Like the next biggest stack might have been 40 or 50,000, and we've got $500,000 each. And I don't remember the numbers, but that ratio is right. And we play a hand. I'm on the button, which means I'm last to act. He's in the big blind. I raise with 2 kings. He calls, and the flop comes King 10-9. He bets the flop. Or no, I think he checks the flop. I bet. A pretty big bet because I have top set. I have 3 kings. He calls.
Whoa.
Okay. The turn comes, and it's like a throwaway card. It's like a deuce.
Yeah.
Irrelevant card. He checks. I bet again pretty big because now, and I think there's a flush draw, so I'm scared of a flush because now the fact that he calls me, I think, is this guy on a flush draw, right? So I really just kind of want him out of this hand at this point. I really don't want to tangle with the other stack. He check raises me all in. By the way, again, King 10-9, I think deuce 3, whatever the last card, irrelevant card. If he has Queen Jack, he has a straight, and I'm beat. But that's the only hand that can beat me. And I tank because I can still fold and have a lot of chips, like still have way, way more chips than, again, maybe as much as everybody combined. But this is like a huge overbet. This guy just pushes all in.
That sounds like a bluff, right? I mean, I'm not a player.
No, you don't, probably not. Like, not this guy. This guy's...
So you think he's probably got the straight?
I've been playing with this guy for
he's got the straight.
Well, I don't know. So I start, one of my strings, at some point they made this illegal. I would talk. I'd go, oh, really? You have Queen Jack? Or what? Do you have 2 aces? I was like, oh, do you have this? And I'm talking and I'm watching him and I'm listening with my eyes.
That's now illegal.
I don't know. Maybe it's legal again. It's a stupid rule. That's one of the dumbest rules I could have made, right?
Got it.
So, because he doesn't have to answer.
Sure.
Right? But they're like, you can't talk about the hand, right? Well, everybody, it's only me and him. Like everybody that is in this tournament that put up this money and has made it this far knows that Queen Jack is like the hand, right? So now I've got to make, this is a big decision, right? And I'm literally thinking it's $365K for first and second's probably $200K or whatever it was, right? And I finally come to the conclusion this guy does not have Queen Jack. Whatever read I had, this was one of my strengths. And you know me well enough to know that in business, when my gut says, logic says you should just fold there and just live to fight another day, right? You should probably just go away. But my gut told me he didn't. Turns out he has 2 10s, right? And I think I even told him I had 2 kings. I might have even showed. At one point in time, you could turn your cards over and show people, which was one of my favorite things. I would show them what I had and see what their reaction was. They definitely made that illegal at some point. And this might have still been at a time where you could do that. In fact, I think maybe I did that. This is a lot of years ago. And turns out he has 2 10s. I mean,
if you knew he had 2 10s, you'd call him. But the river came. And the river came at 10.
And then the river came at 10. The only card that could beat me was a 10. Yeah. So I would have had basically a million chips win the next. Like I don't want to say. I mean, it's a $365,000 pot. But I've had. We talked about this, that I always felt like I wasn't supposed to get really rich playing poker.
Yeah.
And I always made good money, but I never won the really big hands.
Yeah.
And I've thought about like the 100 biggest hands I've played. It really is like God or the universe or something conspired against me. And
for your own good, though.
But for my own good. I think, I really actually believe like I was not intended to win that. I mean, in L.A. playing the L.A. Poker Classic with over $1 million first prize, I had a really big stack right on the edge of the money one time and got bad beat twice within like 5 hands, which still didn't break me, by the way, but it left me really short stacked.
Sure.
And by the way, both with kings. I had kings twice in like 5 hands and lost both with them.
Queens for me, man. If I have 2 queens, I usually fold them now. I don't even bet them.
So
That's smart.
Probably not. Probably not so much. So, like I've played a lot.
I do a lot of that playing poker, by the way. In all the years Randy and I have known each other, by the way, for the listeners, we've never played poker, and for a good reason.
No.
Now you understand why I won't play with them.
We're not. I'm gonna have a hard time winning in any games we play for the stakes. I'm not gonna be interested, honestly. I'll just give you my
$20. We can save the time.
But a few years ago, this was right before COVID. I played a Omaha hand where I lost $50,000 cash.
What's Omaha?
4 cards instead of 2, and we were playing.
And you still 5 up.
Yeah, same, just like Hold'em, except you get 4 cards.
But
there's a couple other
5 community cards.
Yeah, same.
Okay, got it.
Same. A couple other differences that aren't important for this, but I played a hand where we were playing. There's a new thing where you do these bomb pots where there's 2, not 1 board, there's 2 boards, and half of it, you win this board, you get half, and you win this board, you get half. I flopped. I don't remember exactly. The board was like, one board was like 9-6-2 with 2 clubs, and the other one was 9-6-3. Almost identical boards, both with two clubs or something, or
just 2 different sets of cards.
Yeah, it's just one deck, but you have 2 board. You're playing.
I got it. There's 2.
Poker players are degenerates, John. Like
I just
we
didn't
want
know
to gamble.
I just didn't know you had 2 sets of nines of
but
clubs.
Omaha is way more gambling than Hold'em. So people that get bored and don't get a thrill out of Hold'em start playing Omaha.
Got it.
Which is part of the reason I played, but it's more that the math is much more complex and I had a bigger edge there. And
so
then
you had 2 clubs on both boards.
Yeah, so I had a pair of 6s, so I had a set of 6s on both boards.
Yep.
And I had a king high flush draw on both boards. Okay. So one of them has like 9 of clubs, 3 of clubs. The other one has 6 of clubs, 2 of clubs, whatever. Anyway. So I have a king high flush draw in 6. And anyway, the way the betting went back and forth, like it was the guy potted it, I repotted it, he repotted it. And at some point,
no idea what any of that means.
Guy, and
what does pot mean? You just match the pot?
The biggest bet in pot limit Omaha is the size of it. So if there's 2,000, you can only bet 2,000.
I'm with you now. Okay.
But once you bet 2,000, now there's 4,000 in.
So you can buy 4,000.
I can bet, well, I call your 2, which makes it 6.
Plus raise.
And I can raise you 6, so I can make the next bet 8.
Got it.
Anyway, the last time I potted it, it was like 20-some thousand. And this guy goes all in over the top of me, and he had me covered, and I had like 50,000 in front of me, so it was another 30 to call. And I'm like, oh my God, he has a set of 9s. And I'm like, well, I have to call because there's a 9 on both boards. This is really unlucky, but I always have my clubs to fall back on, and hopefully I hit a club on one of these 2 boards. Well, it turns out he has an ace high flush draw on both boards, and I'm drawing dead. Like I've been unlucky a lot. That wasn't unlucky. Well, it's unlucky, and it's a setup hand that there's no way really to get it. Like I kind of
you walked into it.
But most of the hands I've lost that have been big, I think almost every other really big hand I've ever lost, I've been in good and lost, got unlucky. Yeah. This particular hand, I literally could not win.
Yeah.
So I lost like 50. It might have even been like 54, 55,000 in that pot. I mean, that was pretty painful.
Yeah.
And that was when I wasn't playing for a living. It was way more painful working as a full-time job because that money. That money has a different meaning when you play it every day. You become a little numb to it. There, where I was going to this game like once or twice a week even, I was playing pretty consistently at that time because I was making a lot of money in this game, but that was a not small setback.
So any lessons that you thought poker told you that as you got distance from the game, you thought, I thought that was a life lesson from poker, but I wasn't right? I know there's life lessons from poker you definitely have that are right from risk mitigation. All that. We'll come back to that.
I thought?
Yeah, it's like, hey, I think poker taught me a lesson, but as I got further away from the game, maybe that wasn't as helpful as I thought.
Can't think of anything like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but nothing.
So let's talk about what it does, because poker might be the ultimate game in asymmetry, like in the evaluation of asymmetric risk, right? So it's like you're constantly looking at it like, one unit of risk to 10 units of reward, or 10 units of risk to 1 unit of reward. Like that's asymmetry.
Expected value, by the way. You love acronyms. I don't, but EV is very common in that, right?
Expected value is a great statistical term.
Yeah.
used in probability all the time.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're constantly, there's so much, right? Like, one of the great things is you get feedback, right? So you and I are in a hand. One of the things that I think makes poker the greatest game, by the way, the complexity of poker is so far beyond chess, it's ridiculous. Because chess, you can see the entire board, right?
Yeah.
And you joke about us playing, but if we play one hand of poker, you and I, you've got almost a 50-50 chance of winning, right? Like, I don't have much of an edge on one hand. We play 10 hands, I got a little bigger. We play 100 hands, we still play thousands of hands, I have a huge edge. You're not going to win.
Smoked, yeah.
Right, you're just not going to win. But
by the way, I think that probably starts at 10 hands, but
I mean, luck can run for, I've watched people's luck run for years.
Yeah.
Really have. So,
I'd rather be lucky than good.
But one of the great things about poker is you get immediate feedback. You put it in, the cards go over.
Yeah.
You see if you won. Sometimes the cards don't go over. You bet they fold, and you're still getting feedback right away. The thing that's interesting is in most things, like if I have a business and I make a decision, it either works or it doesn't work. And I think we think, oh, I do this. I think, oh, I made the wrong decision. Well, maybe. Maybe I actually made the right decision. Maybe it was just like that one time the 10 came out.
Yeah.
Maybe that would have worked 98 out of 100 times. And I just happened to be unlucky that the 2% happened the time I decided to try it, and I don't try it again. Whereas in poker, if the cards go up, you can do the math and find out, did I make the right decision?
Yeah.
Was the pot size right?
When people do the math wrong in poker, like that 10 coming up was a 2% chance, but most people think like the chances of getting 4 of a kind is like a de minimis chance. But you correctly point out that at that point he had 3 of a kind, and 3 of a kind with that many cards left is a 2% chance.
Right.
Most people don't do the math that way.
Right.
They think like, oh, well, 4 of a kind is 1 in whatever. How many 4 of a kinds? 1 in.
I don't know. A lot.
1 in not. Yeah, a much smaller percent. But that's bad math.
Right.
Right. So people do bad math like that all the time.
Almost nobody understands statistics, I've learned.
Yeah.
Like they really don't. And you hear a lot of it with medical in your area, like you hear like the effectiveness of a drug. That I heard a study recently that.
Well, to be fair, you're not even talking about. You're talking about something even more narrow, which is probability.
Yeah. But the effect, like drug, like they did a thing with doctors and something. The numbers might be a little up, but I think it was like 85% of doctors, when they asked the doctors what that meant, they didn't understand what it meant, right?
Yeah.
The drug effectiveness. And so the average person, if doctors 85% are wrong, the average person's probably 2% understand, right?
Yeah.
And so even within poker, most people don't understand the statistics. And I think even a lot of pros don't fully get it. And
so what do you pull away from that, though? So, I mean, you're 10 years past poker, whatever you are. What are the things you carry with you that are helpful lessons for you today?
I think it's, oh God, there's so many. I mean, a lot of it really comes down to dealing with people. And my strength had more to do with, even though I was good at the math, it had more to do with the psychology, the dealing with the people. I think the resilience. Like, there's times I lost. I played right. Like, one year I went to the World Series of Poker. I spent 6 weeks in Vegas and had one winning day. Like, I would drive to the bank and get money. Like, I would literally sell stocks from my brokerage account, transfer it to my bank, take the money out. I pretty much lost a house during the World Series of Poker. Okay? Like, just couldn't win. Didn't play bad. Kept getting my money in good, and it just didn't work, right? But there's resilience. There was believing, like, look, I made the right play, and eventually it will work out, right?
So, one thing I've come to learn about you over the years I've known you is that you take feedback in the same way which is given, which is like for the benefit of having the feedback. And that's not true of everyone all the time, right? Like, you're really able to step back and evaluate. And that's one of the great things about our relationship is when we're talking about your company or a problem that one of our friends is working through or whatever, like you're really able to, I've only seen you truly get emotional about something maybe one time in 10 years, twice in 10 years.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that's just, it's the process versus the results. It's emotional control.
When
it's understanding.
I said that wrong. It's not that you haven't been emotional. It's that you haven't lost emotional control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a big part, right? By the way, some people are fantastic poker players until something goes wrong. And then it's called going on tilt. And they lose like somebody plays perfect, and then something goes bad, and then there's just this cycle. I got to make up for it, and they start making
Bad choices.
bad choice after bad choice after bad choice, and the next thing you know, they're broke. Or here's another one. I used to love this one. World Series of Poker, a big $10,000 tournament. There'd be these old, really conservative, like the guy I talked about in the tracksuit, right? Those guys, they take a shot, and they sit there, and they play really tight, really conservative. And you could just pick on them, right? Because they were never going to fight back. They were never going to, and you could.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite moves, this is going to sound insane, and I could only execute it like once a year. I'd get in the right situation. I would look for them to get aces, right? Because these guys were tight enough and good. Again, you wouldn't do this against a bad player, but they would sit there. I would intentionally call when I really thought they had aces. And then didn't matter what two cards I had. Let's say the flop comes, whatever, 10-5-3. I would check, they would bet, I would check raise. And they're like, oh, I got aces. This is great. And they would call, but they get a little conservative. And then I would fire, and I would fire. And they would always fold. Every time I did.
Because it looks like you got 3 or 4 or something.
Because it looks like I hit a set. And they're good enough, conservative enough to fold.
Yeah.
So this is a really hard, this is not something. You have to pick the right, you have to wait.
Right player, right day,
you got to
situation.
wait months in order to do it. But it was one of my favorite, I loved this bluff. Yeah. I liked it way too much, frankly. Because the first time I pulled it off, I don't know why I pulled it off. I just felt I could. And then I looked for,
the player's got to play tight.
Quick story. The last year I played the World Series of Poker, I hadn't been playing. I'd started the cabinet business. I really hadn't been playing. And I thought I'm going to go take, one shot. Or maybe this is a year after I'd started it. And I go, and I'm playing a table, and I'm rusty. I'm just not really on and playing those stakes for 10 million first prize or plus endorsements and whatever. And we're several hours in, but there's this old tight guy that I'm explaining. He's at the other end of the table, and he hasn't played a hand in hours. I raise with a hand. I think it was king, queen, but doesn't matter even what it was. And he re-raises. I'm out of position, which is just doesn't matter for here, but it shouldn't call. But I think, okay, I want to play with this guy, right? And the flop comes something like we talked about, right? Like, let's just say it was 10-5 deuce. In fact, I'm almost positive there was a 10 on the board. And I check, he bets.
Which means he probably has a pocket pair.
Well, I don't know at this point. I don't have enough information, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to represent a set. And I check raise him. He gets nervous. He looks at me. He calls. The turn comes. I fire a big bet representing a set. By the way, the turn is a 9. So now I've actually got hope. I've got 2 overs. Like, I don't think my king or my queen are probably good if they hit, but they could be. He could have jacks or something. But if a jack comes, I got a straight, right? Which is, there's 4 jacks. I got an 8% chance, but at least I have a chance now. He hems and haws and hems and haws and hems and hums, and he calls. Well, now I'm committed. On the river, I'm like, I'm getting this. I'm getting this guy to fold. So I put in. Again, this is, by the way, this takes 3 or 4 days to make it to the money.
Sure.
It's stupid to put all your chips at risk with nothing.
Right.
The river comes, I have nothing. I have king high. I can't beat an ace, let alone 2. And at this point, I'm pretty convinced he has aces, aces or kings. I'm almost positive he has aces or kings, right? And I just decide, screw it. And at this point, I don't know, I've put 10,000 in. I bet like another 15,000. In essence, it breaks me and it breaks him. It's not quite all in, but to me, it was more intimidating to bet less than all in than all in. So I make this big bet that, in essence, if one of us loses, we lose. And this guy goes, it's called tanking. He starts thinking, and he's thinking, and he's thinking. And I haven't been playing, remember, and I am having a hell of a time controlling my emotions. My heart is pounding. I am sweating. I am shaking. This was not what's supposed to be happening.
Right.
I have thoughts in my mind. I think I need to tell him I'm bluffing because I'm afraid I'm going to have a heart attack. I was literally scared, but I'm so competitive. I'm thinking, am I willing to die to carry out this bluff? Like I was actually thinking about my health, and I couldn't because I hadn't been playing, and now I'm playing for these stakes, and my heart is just beating, and I'm just I'm actually contemplating for minutes telling him I'm bluffing or showing him my hand, like, because I think that. And this guy, he was just kind of looking down. He wasn't really looking at me. And if he did, he didn't get the right read, and he folded. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. Now, within a day or two, I kind of got back into my rhythm. But yeah, so, but being able to stick with a read and go with it is definitely, something that, that I think came out of it. I mean, reading people, there's a lot of things. Risk management, bankroll management.
But we're going to do this again. I think this has been I think I'm going to go sit down now. I'm going to think about what I've learned today about poker and about the early part of our conversation, about the impact of poker on my life. And we'll come back and do this again. I think I'm going to have a lot of questions about just some of the, this was a lot about the table. I'm going to have a lot of questions about what happens outside the table and the lifestyle around it. So this has been amazing.
That's probably a more interesting conversation in a lot of ways. Yeah.
It's great. I love it. Randy, thanks for letting me dive in here. I'm going to go put a lot of thought into like the around the table questions. We're going to come back to poker part 2 for sure.
Great.
Awesome stuff. Randy, professional poker player at one point, and still one of the best risk managers I know. So that's great. Thanks for being here again. Hey guys, if you want to like and subscribe, and tell your friends about Tales of Abundance, come check out the website. Grab some tools for your business, for your personal life, and we're glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Come back again soon.